So has anybody been following the primaries? They are still happening, even though as a Californian, it kind of feels like that was about 20 years ago for us.
Yeah. I've been following a news source, Dave Kempa on Facebook.
Oh, what's he saying?
Extremely unreliable shit. 100%.
He is fake news.
He's a fucking
That
hack.
guy's always he's just like posting shit, and it takes like forever to get to like the real facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mostly like jet fuel can't melt steel beams.
Pictures of chemtrails.
Sure.
Things
but no.
nature.
So the primaries were on Tuesday in New York, Kentucky, and Virginia, and we saw some really wild wins for progressives and even Democratic Socialists.
Yeah, and especially a bunch of them in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And AOC has officially put to bed the theory that like that was just a one-off, kind of trick or whatever. Like she dominated her district easily.
Yeah, currently, I mean, not all of them are counted because you obviously have to do absentee ballots during the COVID crisis, but she is currently sitting at something like 70% of the vote.
Yeah.
Running away with her district.
She's crushing it.
After the corporate folks put a bunch of money behind this, former Republican journalist, and
that sounds right. The Republicans are like literally running Ben Shapiro against AOC, or the Democrats are.
Mm-hmm. But no, it shows that she will have this bully pulpit in this district for as long as she goddamn pleases, and that's really pretty exciting.
I love to think about that.
I love to think about that. The other thing I love to think about is, have you guys been following Charles Booker? So Charles Booker is, he's in Kentucky. He's running for the same seat. He's running for the Senate seat, McConnell's Senate seat. But
Mitchell McConnell,
the famous turtle overlord.
It's hilarious.
Of corporate
a lot of
misery.
people didn't know it's also turtles all the way up.
Yeah.
Oh.
So before Tuesday, most of the air in that race was taken up by Amy McGrath, who is at
Mark McGrath's sister, right?
Is that? That's not real, right?
Of Sugar Ray fame.
That it's not. She's not really related to the Sugar Ray.
No, that's the joke. That's the joke on the Trillbilly podcast.
Wish that was true. I wish that was true.
No, so she's like, to be nice about it, she's like a really shitty Democrat. But
it's being nice.
That's the nice version of that.
Is that nice?
She's a terrible Democrat, but she's running against like the most hated man in the country. So like everybody's pumped to see her campaign. It is truly that is truly a choice between the lesser of two evils in like a really awful, dismal way. But the part that I love to think about
has arrived.
Charles Booker is like a full-on progressive who is challenging her. Because she's an awful Democrat, she's got like millions of dollars at her disposal, right? Because that's how that works. The more awful you are, the more money they throw at you.
Correct.
So her war chest is
and
like
DNC money,
right?
Yeah,
and it's like $40 million is what she's working with on this campaign. Charles Booker comes in with like just over $700,000 or something.
Yeah, $788,000. So not even, what is it? Not even 1/40th of what she has.
And he's beating her. So all the results are not in. We won't know anything officially until the 30th, I believe. But as of right now, with the count that they have at the moment, he's beating her by 3.5 points. And he has been coming up every time there's new votes in. He's doing better than he was before. So it looks pretty good for him. No matter what, it's a huge testament to the power of grassroots. It's a David and Goliath thing. Even if she turns it around and beats him right now, like he still did way better than he should have, given that disparity in campaign finances. It looks like he's likely not to lose. So
it's a wildly successful day all around for
Yes.
the lefties and the Democratic primaries. And I think a lot of us were concerned with COVID and the tenor of these races. And in particular, now that Bernie is not in the presidential race, were the progressives going to come out and show? And they did. And, we've got Booker, who might actually win this seat. We've got Jamal Bowman, who basically, he's the AOC of 2020. He's going to join her and Rashida Tlaib as the third Democratic Socialist in the House. And he's just like in AOC's campaign, he's a person of color in a district that is mostly people of color, who wrested the seat away from this moderate old white dude. And it's really kind of exciting to see. And you hope that it means that there's more to come in future primary races, and then again in November. But again, and Flo, you've talked about this before, do not get our hopes up. There's a lot that can happen between now and November, but
A lot.
there are glimmers of hope here that we should.
And we also have seen that locally. I mean, we talked about the race with Katie Valenzuela and Steve Hansen, but certainly another example of somebody who the good money was on,
right,
and didn't
go
win.
that way.
And there are a lot of people who are trying to figure out what happened, because they had their money on the establishment candidate that they thought was going to win.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think the more this happens, the more it opens up the opportunity, which I know that Dave is always interested in, for us to have a viable third party, for us to be able to actually move some things in a different direction. And, my goal is always to have 5 parties, because I hate having a 2-party system, because it means that one party gets to anchor and everybody else gets to be the people who are like, well, I'm not that. And it's a really mishmash kind of like alliance. And I'd love to be able to actually be in a party where I felt like the people there have at least agreed on some general outcomes other than anybody but Trump.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of political theory there, and we can talk more about that on a future episode, I think, but it's called Diverger's Law. And our voting process in the US almost necessitates a sort of game theory of 2 parties. And there are ways we could change our system. And California has actually started changing it, which is really exciting. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're not all that jokey in this intro, but I just think hey, we can be happy right now. This is
it is it's nice every now and then to get a little bit of good news, and that certainly, and this primary so far was certainly had some of that. Honestly, the Kentucky thing is exciting. We might get to finally be done with Mitch McConnell, which I have a bottle of really, really, really nice Kentucky bourbon that I've been saving for the moment that I don't have to fucking read about that guy anymore. So
I've got a bottle of really, really, really bad Kentucky bourbon for just that reason.
I've got no Kentucky bourbon.
You can have some of mine. But we might, as we're drinking it, we might be bringing in somebody who actually legitimately doesn't suck, which is not typically the Democrat way. Typically you get somebody who sucks, just like they only suck at a 9 instead of an 11. And that's how what we're supposed to feel good about. We might actually get somebody who has a negative suck ratio. He might dip into the fucking positive a little bit. And that will shock that will shock the country. We aren't ready for politicians who don't suck at all. I don't know.
think I'm emotionally prepared.
I don't think
know
I
if
am.
my
It
heart
will.
can
It will
take it.
shock the very roots of our democracy in this country when that happens. Anyway,
Well, great.
let's stay optimistic about that one.
And let's start the show.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
Okay.
Stay thirsty.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And a very special guest tonight, who is, as you might be able to tell, sharing the microphone with Flo from a very safe social distance in Asantewaa Boykin. How are you, Asantewaa?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
We're really happy to have you tonight. You know, you do some amazing work. You are, first of all, one of the sort of head folks with the Anti-Police Terror Project, as well as, and you know, APTP has been central to the George Floyd demonstrations and the movement in the streets of Sacramento. On top of that, you also, are you the founder of MH First?
I mean, I was a part of the group. I don't know. Titles are weird. So
Okay.
Kind of.
Well, I mean, you were there from the beginning.
Yep.
And MH First it's the acronym there is Mental Health First.
Mhm.
And we've talked about your work before on the show. You do amazing work on the weekends. You know, I believe it's 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Is that it?
Yep.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, providing basically emergency response if there is someone that folks happen to see out there experiencing a mental health crisis. You are effectively an option that is not police. And so we thought it would be really great to have you on the show this episode because our whole focus was going to be about mental health and policing. So can we just start out, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with both APTP and MH First?
Okay. I am one of the co-founders of the Anti-Police Terror Project. It's myself, Kat Brooks, and Terha Ak. Upon moving here to Sacramento, we thought it'd be a great idea for APTP to have a Sacramento chapter. We have been having conversations. So the reason why APTP was formed is because we existed in another form before APTP. And what we came to understand is that we were only working from a reactionary framework, right? And we wanted to kind of create a framework that was reactionary and also proactive, right? Or actionary. So that's how APTP came about, right? So APTP, we still can get folks into the streets. We're well-versed in direct action, how to, hold a march that is equitable and safe for folks, right? For the most part, while respecting diversity of tactics. And we also began to investigate after incidents of police terror happened, impact the narrative, kind of put the state on notice that if you murder someone, expect consequences, right? If not in the justice system, then at least in the media, right? You're gonna feel the pain, you'll be exposed. So we began to have strategy conversations about how do we organize the police out of our institutions. And one of the things that we landed on was we know that the police you're more likely to be murdered by police if you're in the midst of a mental health crisis. So we were like, why are they responding to mental health crisis? Is this a place that we can organize them out of our systems? And the answer was yes, hence why we decided on creating Mental Health First.
And you're a registered nurse, so you have a background in sort of, taking care of folks who might have some sort of adverse mental health condition, in the line of your work?
Yes, I was a psychiatric nurse for a little bit over a decade. And then I currently work in emergency medicine. And I think that over kind of like coming from that intersection, really seeing the gaps of like how folks that have chronic mental health issues are using the ED, right, as like a homeless shelter, right? Because there's just no services, especially like in the middle of the night.
Right.
And then how they're really not being treated in the way that they would be treated if they were being treated by folks who studied a very long time to do psychiatry versus being treated by folks who studied a very long time to do emergency medicine, right? So.
And so when did MH first come into being here in Sacramento? What does your team look like? How many folks do you have on it? And I guess my follow-up to all of that will be, how can one get involved in that?
Okay, yeah. So I really want to take, I try to do this anytime I talk about MH First. There's like a really brave group of folks who just started to have a conversation about like, what does this look like, right? And we had this thing we called a dreaming session, where we were like, if there was an endless amount of resources, like what would we build, right? So we got all hype and encouraged and inspired, and then we had to go, okay, now there isn't an endless amount of resources. So what can we do with crowdsourcing and donations from our own pockets, right? So then we whittled it down to a few things, and then we started to build the framework. We officially launched in January. Transitions Clinic, which is a buprenorphine clinic here in Oak Park, loans us their space or donates their space for our volunteers to kind of sit while we're waiting for phone calls. And then Harm Reduction Services donated our RV.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have a cool little RV. It's kind of been like the movement RV right now. Like it shows up to protest and it unloads speakers. It does all the things. And it also response to mental health crisis. So it's
I love it.
it's
And
really a great
Harm
asset.
Reduction Services does amazing work too.
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. So yeah, we launched in January. We have some, I would say like our core in quote staff, because no one really gets paid. It's about 5 or 6 folks that do all like the background stuff. They schedule and train and unlock doors for volunteers and make sure that the phone bill's paid. I do a really shitty job at that. But, you know.
we all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. You can't do it all.
It gets done.
Believe me,
So,
I'm
yeah.
not the business mind behind voices either.
Is there a business mind behind this show?
The thing that she's not mentioning is that she's new to even having a calendar. Yeah. So there was a time where I'd be like, okay, so we're going to get together on Tuesday. And she'd be like, yeah, Tuesday. And then I'd be like, so we're getting together? And she'd be like, bro, what time? Is that today? And I'd be like, your life has so many moving parts. How do you function like this? So we were talking earlier today and she was like, I got a calendar. I've been on time for everything today. And I was like, I am proud of you, sis.
Moving on up. Hell yeah.
Okay, keep going with your sort of the storyline of MH First.
Yeah, so we launched. We have a pretty solid volunteer base, like 30 to 40 people. With those folks, there's like a solid 10 that are consistent and show up and stay up all night. The training that we built is, we call it self-determined crisis management, because our goal isn't to determine whether or not you're like, you can be held against your will, right? We're just there to kind of like listen and help you come to your own conclusions about like what your next steps are.
Right.
And I know that sounds really shiny and and sometimes folks are not in the space to make that next step. So our goal is just to make them as safe and as comfortable as possible in that moment. Because, you know, if someone's really psychotic, they're not like talking about next steps, right? But how do we make sure that you're safe and that there's someone around you who can help keep you safe? And what are they going to help you do tomorrow, right? So helping people institute a safety plan in some way. And I really love it. It's awesome. It's an awesome way to defund the police.
I think that's exactly why we have you here to sort of discuss your work as an alternative to that. Can you tell me, are there any instances in which you've gotten calls and you know, you could kind of outline how that panned out and how that looks as opposed to when the responding person to a call like this might be a police officer?
Yes. For instance, we got a call. It was a bystander call. It was a young woman who was kind of running in and out of traffic. And this was actually during COVID, and we were like, "Oh, bro, we gotta go," because, like, you know, we gotta go, right? Because if not, then the police are gonna show up. So we put on masks. We had a thermometer. You know, we showed up. So when we did show up, we were just like, "Hey, hi, my name is so and so. Are you thirsty?" And they were like, "Yeah." So then they came out of the street, and we gave them some water. And she kind of had a dry cough. So we took her temperature. She wasn't running a fever, and the hospital was close by. So we asked her, like, do you feel like, she was kind of psychotic. But when we asked her, do you need to go to the hospital? She cleared right up and was like, no. So because we listen, right? Like if someone is in the middle of psychosis and they clear up when you talk about taking them to somewhere they don't want to go, then I'm clear that that's not where you want to go. So we just made sure she was comfortable, made sure she had some food. We sat and just kind of watched for a minute, just to make sure she was settled and that hopefully she wouldn't run back into traffic. And, you know, that was it. Whereas if PD showed up on scene, only she could have ended up dead, right?
Right.
Because she was behaving in a way that's considered erratic. So either dead or incarcerated and then held against your will inside of a medical facility simply for being sick. And maybe she was under the influence, but that also is an illness.
Right.
Right.
And not something...
And not a crime.
And not a crime. Right. Exactly.
Right. Well, not something we should criminalize, definitely.
Right.
You know, the book, listeners, we're reading Alex Vital's The End of Policing. You can get it for $3 now. They just upped it from free. The ebook from
it's capitalism, man.
Online, I know. But get it now before it goes up to $4. But we're sort of going through every chapter on it throughout the course of these episodes and discussing these chapters through the local lens, which is why we have Asantewaa on, because chapter 4 is on mental health crises and police being the first responders there, and how often in the US that results in, you know, in many cases them getting jailed.
Right.
But in worst case scenarios, you know, getting harmed, hospitalized, or even killed by police. You know, you also talk about how really what you did was just sit, listen, and, you know, kind of create a safe energy for this person. Part of what would make your job easier here would be a stronger social safety net, correct? I mean, we've obliterated our mental health care system.
Of course.
We've obliterated our homeless services, which Shannon, you can speak to. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Are you talking to me or Shannon? Okay.
Not me.
Shannon doesn't want to talk.
Oh, I can talk. I mean, yeah. Well, sorry. I thought that, I didn't think that was a question for me.
I know. I was looking at both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, I guess it is important to note that, you know, we've talked about this on the show time and time again, that police are not social workers. Police are not mental health workers. Police are not a support system at all. Police are trained to, like, shoot to kill, right? It's like,
they're violence workers.
They're violence workers. Yes. I mean, they are terrorizing our communities. And we know based on the numbers that the actual number of calls that police departments receive for like violent crime are incredibly low. They're receiving calls like the one that Asantewaa just spoke about, right? Like people who are behaving erratically, or questionably,
neighbor disputes, like things that don't require armed men.
All things that really could, I mean, really, if we just like took a moment and could like imagine how you deal with sort of like person to person conflict, or a person who is like experiencing that mental health crisis, it's really just about like holding space for that person in the moment, right? Creating a safe space for that person to sort of like talk through what they like. These are the person that Asantewaa spoke about, right? Like that person still gets to decide what they want for their life, what they want for that moment,
right?
You know, assuming they can clear up to a way to be able to say like, I don't want to go to the hospital, like, you know, because also the hospital is not really the mental health care that they're going to receive there is not the same as they would from folks who are trained to deal with people in mental health crisis. So, and I think, you know, in the work that I find myself doing, this is
listeners, just so you know, I'm sorry, Shannon. Shannon runs the daytime drop-ins center for women experiencing emergency homeless situations and children. And so, you know, she is frontline to this kind of stuff every single day. Keep going.
Yeah. So this is like, you know, these are, anyone who works with folks experiencing homelessness has a very keen awareness to the need for people to come in and provide an intervention when a person is experiencing a mental health crisis, because our fucking federal government effectively eliminated mental health care for people under the Reagan administration, created homelessness as we know it today, and has left us without any and we just continue to defund those services time and time and time again. You know, well, the police here in Sacramento anyway get a 3.5% raise. But that's not what we're talking about, right?
Wish we had someone on the show to talk about that sometime.
Yeah, it would be nice if we
have not covered that basically at all on this show.
No.
Yeah, so
we've never ever talked about the completely fucked up funding that or the way that that our monies are allocated in this community.
You'll hear about it Tuesday.
If we're honest, there's just more money in prisons, right? Like,
right.
If we're absolutely honest, there's so much more money to be made in incarcerating people than there is in treating them.
Right. And you know, this is actually a thing that happens in social service settings where folks are like, we don't know what to do with people who are experiencing an acute mental health crisis. And so we call the police because there is no other option. And the way we talk ourselves into making that okay is because it's like, oh, well, they're going to get jail psych or they're going to get prison psych, right? Like they're going to get the support they need there. And it's like, well, actually, no, because they're getting the support they need by terrorists. So who are just traumatizing them over and over and over again. And so they're going to come out with a whole new fucking mental health disorder that the goddamn system has created for them.
Exactly.
Let me just say on that point, this makes me so angry because Scott Jones went to a community meeting in the unincorporated area of Sacramento and literally said to people, someone asked the question like, well, you know, what about mental health or something, you know, something somewhat vague. And he said, we have mental health services in the jail. And that was literally his answer to how are we going to handle this problem. And he felt no sense of shame whatsoever in that being his response. He was like, well, obviously the jail can do all of that. We should just put them there. And I was just like, this is both an example of like, when that's your only available tool, that's what you go to, but also just how deep the like brainwashing goes that he didn't even see a problem with that. He wasn't like, you know, unfortunately, right? Like the only way that people get services is when they're incarcerated and we really should do something about it. He was like, yeah, let's lock them up and get them some services. Like,
right.
I mean, what's next? Let's lock them up so they can learn how to read? Like, are we kidding right now?
We have to get to a place where we understand that we cannot lean on or call on a systemically racist institution to provide support for people in crisis. We cannot ever be comfortable saying, yeah, let's send people to jails or prisons because they're going to get the mental health services that are otherwise not available for them. Like, let's be real about why those services are not available for them outside of imprisonment. And it's because we live in a space that is fundamentally fucked up and racist and refuses to provide services for Black and brown people in the way that they should be provided for them. Like, so like, fuck
Which,
you,
by the
Scott
way,
Jones.
this whole place is run by Democrats, and they're
Right.
the ones refusing to do that.
I think like
right,
a
and we
big
have
part
to
of
say that
like
a lot.
I think like a big part of like the issue and why guys like Scott Jones get away with this is because I feel like a lot of people still have this like conception in their head that prison is ultimately like this force of good that like rehabilitates criminals and like somehow is like a net positive for society. People really still believe that shit, like a lot of people, you know, and I think recently sort of more and more people are starting to wake up to it, but like prison is not about rehabilitation. Prison is not about serving the community. Prison is about fucking punishment, and it's about capitalism.
Right. It's about power and control.
Scott, this is the one where maybe I'm less of a summer child, because I think Scott is
Love this.
This is our sheriff. I think he's a total cynic, and he knows he's lying through his teeth, and it feels good for him to lie through his teeth.
Of course, he's a
calling it
sadist.
Rehabilitation, yeah.
He's a fucking sadist, and he's a bully, and he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants. You know, he loves.
And anyone who has spent any amount of time working with people who are traumatically impacted by these systems of power, specifically jails and prisons, I think would be able to tell you like very clearly the bullshit quote unquote help or support that people are getting in those systems. Like it's not actual, it's just because like someone like checks a box and says that you got your medicine, and that, well, then when your time's up, you're going to be let out at 2 a.m. with no shoes, no clothes, no meds, no treatment plan, no housing plan, no reentry plan. You're just like completely fucked. And then you end up in the exact same space that took you there, right? If it was a psychotic episode, or if it was like, you know, erratic behavior that threatened to Karen, like that's
threatened to Karen. I love it.
And we also I think the other thing that we need to remember, and Flo has been really incredible about reminding us about this on her social media platforms over and over and over again, is that in Sacramento, the police and fire receive 74.5% of our nearly $4 million budget. And when you break that down, there is just under 27% that goes to support, right? Like that is, are you fucking kidding me? Like this community has like a glaring problem with refusing to provide actual support to people. Like public safety isn't police and fire. Public safety is housing, it's education, it's jobs.
Say that.
Like give us that 74.5% of almost $400 million back, because you're using it wrong and you're fucking people over in the process.
Right.
I would like to ground us in this space that the system that we currently live under is not in fact broken, right? It is doing exactly what it's designed to do.
Totally.
To protect the interests of white male landowners. And the rest of us are just a condition that the white male landowners have to contend with, which is why police in Sacramento get 70% of our budget, because who else is going to protect those affluent white folks from the rest of us who are realizing that they are holding all of the resources while most of us are scraping by, right? Yeah. So I don't want to, the system is fucked up. No, the system's great. We just got to figure out how to dismantle that shit. It just wasn't made for us.
Yep. Firing at all cylinders. And, you know, when you see Darryl up there saying, oh, I'm not going to defund the police, it's not just him being afraid of the police union, which maybe he is. it's also him thinking they will protect me from these angry citizens.
Right. Because
It's also
Darryl is
because
a
they
hef.
gave him $53,000 in campaign donations.
Also true. Yeah.
SAC follows the money. So, like, let's be clear about the relationships that are happening here. And I think, to Asantewa's point, you know, about this system operating the way it's supposed to, this is one of the reasons why I am in such support for us having a constitutional convention. And I know it's a pie in the sky idea, but I want to plant that seed with our listeners, because I think there are interesting things about the way that we have structured ourselves that certainly differ from monarchies and other forms of government that could be useful. But I think any system that was developed by white landowning men and leaves out the majority of the population of the United States merits at minimum some reconsideration.
Absolutely.
But all the other people who have to live under that system. And so I do not deify our founding fathers, because most of them thought it was totally okay to steal land from people who were indigenous and to own people who look like me. But I especially think that any system that they built is built on that. And so I want to go back and question all of the assumptions and figure out, is this the best way of us operating? And I know that there are many flaws that I see, but I'm really open to even unearthing, as if we were to go through that process, what flaws haven't I seen that we could actually reimagine a different way of being? Because the one thing I don't see at all in our function is a restorative justice process. And then when we say we commit to that, we can't even think of how to do that without sort of doubling down on this crime and punishment dogma, because we're like, yeah, but I don't feel safe, so I'm cutting you off, right? And I'm like struggling with this personally, professionally, in all these spaces of like, how do we actually make restorative justice happen when we're all so rooted in a system that only knows how to punish and cast people out, and doesn't actually know how to bring people back into the fray and provide a path for that? And I think it's a hard conversation to have, but I think it goes along with the conversation about how do we abolish our prison system, right? It's like we have to reimagine what it looks like to bring people into community and what safety looks like. And it's hard for us because from the time we were children, we were taught, if you do something bad, there will be punishment that comes along with it. And we were not taught about restorative justice. And so we don't even come by it naturally.
Right. Yeah, especially as an American, it's like an alien concept. And the reason, I mean, the reason why like libs and whatnot, like the city government of Sacramento can't even start to think about restorative justice is that it stands at odds with what we already do. It's not like we could like augment the process we have now to like include that, because it's just not even, that's not the fucking point of what we do. Punishment is the point of what we do. And I want to go back to something that Asantewaa was saying earlier about like the role of police in Sacramento being to protect the like wealthy white capitalists from everybody else. Not just here. That is the reason why police exist and have always existed. That's how they got started. I was reading something that had that traced back as far as like ancient Egypt. The first police we have on record were guys that the pharaoh hired to like protect his fucking treasure from everybody else who wanted to steal it. And that just goes straight down the line. Like the next big police state was ancient Sparta, where like 7/8 of their populations were slaves. The police were there to keep their boots on the necks of the slaves so they wouldn't fucking get up and like and get in the shit of the people who were running the show. And that's how it's always been for thousands of years. That's how it's always been in this country. Police fucking started here to hunt down runaway slaves. From there, we evolve off into police infiltrating and keeping the boots on the necks of like various workers' parties so that they can't organize, they can't rise up and fight for themselves.
We don't talk enough about that. How in the South, right, there was these slave catchers, right, and that's how the police down there kind of got originated. But we don't talk enough about how there was these folks that were sent in to bust up unions so that we couldn't do things like have weekends or time off or not have to work with our children on our breasts. right? So police were infiltrating those spaces too. And I think that we should talk about that more, because I think folks who are not a descendant of African slaves can identify, right, with that part of the narrative.
Yeah. There's actually a piece that was just published in Teen Vogue today, and Teen Vogue
fucking rules, dude. They're on fire 100% of the time.
Very welcome to have them as comrades. Yeah. But the piece
really
effectively was arguing that police unions should be shunned and turned away by other unions because they are not unions. Unions are there to protect people. Police unions exist to protect property.
Right.
Yeah.
Fully different things. In other unions, if a member kills someone, they face consequences. And police unions exist to shield these people who kill, these murderers.
To make sure that they will never see justice.
Yeah. Right. And by the way, I'm shielded by the First Amendment because I didn't name a particular person, so I can call them murderers.
Asantewaa, for Asantewa's purposes, as a news organization, we have to be careful because we can get sued if we make allegations that are not. Dave can explain.
Yeah, so murder is a legal term.
Right.
And you can talk broadly about people murdering under the First Amendment. It's not libel if it's like over 11 people. So it's like police in general. But if you say this cop murdered X person and the cop A was never charged, or B, never went to, was never convicted of it, which of them are, then you are open to being sued for libel, defamation. So yeah, we always have to be careful if we're talking about like this cop murdered this person. We have to say cops murder Americans.
People.
Right.
Yeah.
I got that education early on.
Yeah. I feel like I'm taking us off track a little.
Well, I was just going to say to kind of finish up that thought, like it is like people need to get it out of their heads that cops keeping their boots on the necks of POC, of working class people, basically anybody who isn't a fucking wealthy white capitalist. That's not like the system not working right. That's how the system was fucking designed. That's how it's happening right now. And that's how that is supposed to be. That's the point. It's the fucking
and I promise that we will do that chapter 2 episode. Chapter 2 is on the history of policing. Can I circle it back to Asantewaa and the work they're doing?
Sure. I actually wanted to bring something up that's related to that so that Asantewaa could address this. So for those listeners who may not be aware, Mayor Darryl Steinberg has gone on record as saying that he has this plan for police reform. Yes, we can. He has this plan for police reform that includes looking at 911 services and thinking about which ones could be transitioned away from the police department. And so what I thought was really interesting about this was that it came after people have been calling for this for years. And it, again, to kind of connect the dots, only happened when property was damaged. That is the primary, responsibility of police to prevent that. But the other part that really is really striking to me is that it seemed as if he came up with this idea out of the blue and didn't do any research, because anybody on the ground knows that MH First has been here since January, and MH First was not invited to the meetings that were happening, has not been examined as their primary model, and you would think that the people who are doing this work
already
would be the first people you would reach out to when you want to expand said work. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts sort of on this as a way of moving forward, what your thoughts are in terms of the city doing that, And yeah, just any thoughts that you have that might be relevant to that topic and that conversation.
When I read Darryl's proposal, I had a super like visceral reaction to it. One, because I understood it was gaslighting because he actually did not implement anything that didn't already exist. I think he attempted to sound clever. And then he just did some weird shit where he had came out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and kept like getting on his knee. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Our comrades are still in jail. Either get them out or get out of the space. I digress. But it... I have absolutely no faith that they're going to do anything more than what this moment is going to allow them to get away with. Right? I think they'll give us a bunch of lip service. They'll say that they're going to do this, or say that they're going to do that. And then once the moment is gone, they'll put their money back in their pockets and start talking about something else they consider more relevant. That's what the patterns have taught us. And mental health first will remain and keep remaining. And I don't want to say I was personally insulted, because this is kind of like things that you can predict, but for Darryl to say, let's look at this model that exists in some other place where their demographics are not the same and they still remain heavily reliant on police to figure out how we're going to do this, tells me exactly how tone deaf our city government is, right? Like to attempt to institute a model that doesn't actually serve the demographics of the people that live in your city. Mm-hmm. It just reminds me who he is actually serving, and that is not me. Mm-hmm. That is not people that look like me. That is not marginalized folks. And I've done my research. Darryl Steinberg has championed himself around mental health this, mental health that, mental health this, mental health that. And if he were actually doing his job, then I wouldn't have to do the one that I do for free, right? After work, right? There would be no gaps to be filled if he was truly doing that work. So he's a great campaigner. He's a great politician. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he's not a great leader.
Yeah, no, he's an example of he's a great example of all the things about Democrats that make me feel fucking crazy, you know? Yeah, a lot of talk. He likes to fucking talk in these big impassioned speeches where he's saying shit that you're like, cool, yeah, I'm with you, what you're saying. And then when it's time for the rubber to actually hit the road and it's time for him to actually stand up and really do something meaningful, he never, ever, ever fucking will.
To that point, go ahead, Shannon.
I think the other thing for us to remember goes back to the point that we made multiple times on this episode and episodes prior, which is that Darryl benefits from this system. So he's not going to work to
this system works for Darryl.
Yeah, it's exactly what he fucking wants, right? Like,
to Asantewa's point, he's only going to do what he can get away with, right? He'll only go as far as we push him, which I think is why Flo's fight is so important right now.
100%, yes.
And why it's so important for all of us to point to someone like Asantewaa and the work that she's doing to show there is a better way.
Yeah.
There are other options. And for the listeners, they're pointing all around and it's distracting me. There are other options, and you are doing this currently almost just out of the goodness of your hearts, and it's having an impact. Can I ask you to speak a little bit about what you've learned in the first 6 months, 5 months, 6 months of MH First being on the ground here in Sacramento, and where you are today and how you see it moving forward?
This might sound weird, but I think just the process of working collectively to create that space has taught me more about myself than I think I bargained to learn. About resilience, about our own limitations as human beings, and also our own potential, right? And I hope that as we continue to go about that process and I learn those things about myself, that I'll also hold those same standards to the people that I'm assisting, right? If I've done this thing and created these things and failed and got back up, then I hope that I can kind of transmit that faith and that belief and that hope into the people that I'm serving. And yeah. And I just want to point out something. There was this moment where there was this white lady, I don't know her name, I'm probably being lightweight disrespectful, during the Measure U meeting. She said, wait on the end. Anyways, she was like,
Ryan.
She had pointed out to Darryl, like, you're saying these things as if like it's a given. And I think that's what we're trying to tell you, is that it's time to start thinking outside of those things that you feel like are automatic. And I think that what she said is really where we're at as a society. Like those things that we think are just like, oh, that's just what it is. No, it's time to start rethinking those things and be like, is that what it is? Or can we do something else?
Yeah. And they should see the frustration. They should be scared. They better be. Because people are not okay with this anymore. And like none of this is harming people we love, if not ourselves, personally. Did you know I actually called MH First once?
I do.
You knew that?
I do. Yeah, I knew.
It was early on, and it was an hour before your hour started.
Mm-hmm.
But I called. There was a woman who was psychotic and had knocked over a trash bin on 16th, and the highway patrol showed up, and I was really worried about that. So I called MH First, left a message. You weren't open yet, and I told the cop I was going to cop watch, and he said okay. And they're basically yelling at her, telling her to pick up the trash can and the trash when she's barely even present.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally worked my way around, and we picked up the trash together, and the cop let me and her leave together. And then like I went into a bar to get her water, and when I came out, she had drifted into the night. But I heard back from MH First once 7 o'clock rolled around, and when they asked for my name, it turned out it was Nikki and Mac, who are two very just amazing people and well-known activists. And so it was really cool for me to learn kind of the great people behind all this.
Mm-hmm.
For people who want to be the Nickies and Macs of Sacramento, how can they get involved?
So we are active on all social media platforms. We typically post the trainings that we do quarterly on Facebook. You can connect with us there. It's just MH First Sac. Our telephone number, if you just want to chit chat with us between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. is area code 916-670-4062. Our email is mhfirstsac@gmail.com. And also, if you'd like to know more info about APTP, about MH First, the work that we're doing just in its totality, we have a general meeting every third Thursday. Right now, those are happening on Zoom. Again, you can APTP Sacramento at Gmail or APTP Sac on all the social media platforms.
Great. Is there a way for folks to be trained to be a part of MH First?
Yep, we do quarterly trainings, and that's all you need, right? It's just the training from us, and to be able to sign a confidentiality agreement saying that you will not talk about the experiences that you had with participants or clients, and
Now I feel bad about talking about my experience.
You're fine.
Oh, okay.
You're fine.
Dave brought something up that I think is really interesting, because I know I've certainly had this experience and I just violate all the rules, and I'll just be like, Asantewaa, this thing is happening right now and it's Tuesday at 4:00. What should we do about it, right? Because what I'd like for our listeners to at least get some sense of is just how often are people probably being very kind to you and saying, I know you're not open, but this thing is happening right now, and I really don't want to call the police, and I just don't know what to do. Because I'd like for people to kind of get a sense of like, what's your call volume look like? How many people are reaching out to you? Like, what does this, because there's a need in our community and it can't be understated. And so you work a full-time job already providing healthcare in a system that you are also trying to improve and or destroy and dismantle, right? All of these things. And then at the same time, this thing that you're doing as also a need to undermine another institution that's harmful is also ringing your phone at all hours of the day and night. And so I'd love for you to just be able to, I know we just did our call to action in terms of people, but just to be able to like root people in just how needed this is in our community.
So there are so we as like a staff, end quote, we had to like have agreements that we were turning off the notifications for social media, because sometimes it was just overwhelming and we wanted to respond and we wanted to like answer the message and get up and go. But if we did that, we wouldn't be able to do life, right? We wouldn't be able to do life.
You have to yeah.
And then some shifts, actually, the 7P to 7A, sometimes we get no calls. Absolutely none. Other days, I've been told volunteers weren't able to like sit down. Like they spent all night in the RV driving around from this to that, right? So, and I even like, we talked to mental health urgent care today, and they were telling us it's the ebb and flow, right? Sometimes you're super busy, sometimes you're not. But we do get some, just in the past week, I've had the MH First phone at my house, and I've been leaving it on and just not answering. Part of me needed to know how often it was ringing. And as I've been kind of going about the day, even though I'm not picking it up, it's like motivating me, because I'm like, I want to pick up that phone call. I need someone, if not myself, to be able to pick up that phone call and assist whoever it is that's calling.
That shows us how great this need is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And how committed, I'll grab the microphone, sorry. It also shows us how committed people are to wanting to find an alternative.
Yes.
Because like, it's to the point now where I have a friend who I will leave some details out so that this person can choose or not choose to be identified, but they were in a situation that was, what most people describe as violent. And they were posting on social media saying like, this thing happened, and I know that the place that you typically, and it's like outside of the hours you're working, and I know the place you typically go is to call the police, but I will not do this because I feel like it's not safe for the person who is being violent toward me. Like, I mean, I can't understate that, like, this was not a situation of like perception. Like, this person was actively trying to enter their home and actively trying to throw things after trying to enter their home at them, right? And this person is like, I will not, under any circumstances, contact law enforcement, but I need some help right now, and I'd love to be able to have someone else who could come and help me. And this person was not armed or anything like that, but they were trying to hurt them and trying to get into a space that was theirs to feel safe in, right? And so I think we all can identify with this idea of like wanting to live by our principles, but also having things that are like non-starter, like I have a family and I need to feel safe, and you can't come in here, and you certainly can't, harm me, right? And so I also want to underscore not just like the need in terms of people reaching out to you, but also there are a lot of people in our community who want an alternative. who want to have somewhere else to go where they don't have to feel like, I need help, but I'm also worried that I'm not getting help, but this is my only option. And so I just want to personally thank you for being willing to take this on, because we know that any labors of love are still labor, and they come at great personal sacrifice. You can't unsee and unhear and unfeel the things that you experience. And it really says a lot about your character and the character of other people who have taken this work on, that you do it for free, because the people who are paid to do this work can't do it in a way that is safe or effective. And I just think that is another example of like the people who really deserve to be compensated in this way are often never the ones who are. And we give our money to things that, as you said, the system's working perfectly. So I just really wanted to make sure that we say thank you, and that we're really clear about what this means in terms of like, you have your own family, you have your own, things that you could be doing with your time. You're an artist in your own right. And all of these things are things that you take time away from because this is so important.
I appreciate that. Thank you so wholeheartedly. I appreciate it.
Anyone else want to pile on? Because I know we're all dying too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people with the defund and abolish the police things that are going on right now, including myself, who are sort of really starting to look at preventative measures and other alternatives to policing. Seriously, and to me, it is really inspiring to see someone who not only was like way ahead of that game, but is like not willing, is willing to not only just like entertain the idea, but is actually out in the street getting it done. Mm-hmm. That's really inspiring to me, and yeah, I guess that's it. I'm super impressed by that, and thank you for doing it. It's incredible work.
Yeah, I think I think I said this on the last show. The moment that sticks out to me from the Measure U Commission is when Flo said that the mayor's budget proposal was uninspired. And where that has taken me in my mind is these spaces of like being able to recognize and appreciate folks who are inspired, like you are, and your team is, Asantewaa. You are inspired to call out injustice and then take direct action, and you were inspired to dream big by something that you shouldn't have had to be inspired by, which is the terror that people who look like you experience every day at the hands of the police and at the hands of a system that doesn't create space for folks to receive adequate mental health support. And I think that like what Flo said is really important to acknowledge, and we can't say it enough on this show, that when folks give of their time and energy to hold space for people in crisis, that's big. And Asantewaa, you and your entire team are whole people outside of this thing that you have chosen to dedicate more of your time to. And because our community couldn't find a way to support folks, your energy is being pulled in that, being pulled away from spaces that could otherwise be life-giving for you. And that's not to say that this isn't, because certainly I suspect that you are the kind of person who draws energy from this experience. So that is a very long-winded way for me to say that I appreciate your imagination and your inspiration to this community. And I really hope that Darryl and his whole team of comrades can wake up and see that they aren't the ones who thought anything up, because it came long before them. And like a majority of the time, it probably, like in this instance, came from a woman of color.
This has shades to me of the Black Panther Party feeding hungry kids and filling a gap where the our current establishment just is deeply indicted, right? morally indicted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so thankful there are people like you in the world. And I'm really happy that you're something we can rally around. And I encourage every listener to do what they can to support and protect everything it is that you're doing. And, you know, to echo the other three hosts, thank you.
And it's not just me. I need to say this. It's
Yes.
not just me. There's a whole ass group of folks who throw down and stay up all night and have figured out how to fucking fix the RV and put the wheel on and get back out there. So I see y'all. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. And
I think this is just, it's such a powerful moment to recognize just like what fucking beautiful shit can come from some radical people who are willing to get down and get dirty, right?
Hell yeah.
Like you can, it's like you do it out, it's born out of a space of just like fucked up shit, right? Like, but you can really just like get in there and do it, and you can experience, you know, at the same time that you lament, you can also experience moments of joy and moments of power, and you can take your space back. And I really love that our community has people in it who have been activated long before what is currently happening. But and beyond that, I also love that we've been positioned in this time and space to like just like get the fuck up and go. Like I love it. I love thinking about like a team of people who have worked a 40, 50, maybe even 60-hour a week job, who are staying up all night trying to figure out how to get a fucking RV going and answering calls because someone's running naked in the street. Like, and you're tired and you're thirsty and you're, you know, but you're still out there and you're doing it. I love like the grit that comes from people who are fighting for justice. It's amazing. It's inspiring. I'm not sleeping tonight. I'm
absolutely. I also want to, while we're doing calls to action, I want to let our listeners know that there is going to be apparently a special city council meeting on Wednesday, July 1st, that is going to be entirely dedicated to policing. I also, while we were recording this podcast, just got a message that apparently at Tuesday's regular city council meeting, there is a $23 million item on the agenda for private security for City Hall.
I can't.
Fucking God.
From a very credible source.
My fucking God.
Did you say $23 million?
So that will be apparently.
I hope
the rest of my
Asantewaa is getting a
evening
Truly
tonight,
right now.
into
Yeah.
where and why
Oh my
Asantewaa has
God.
gotten another Truly, because there's nothing else you can do but
kidding me.
think about how ridiculous this is. But I just always want to remind everybody that there is plenty of money. We just don't spend it well.
Right.
And so one of the calls to
people.
action is to take there's a Google slide set at tinyurl.com/giveitbacksac. And please share that so that you can, it goes through what has happened with Measure U. It goes through what the ask is, and it's encouraging people, and it's very easy to understand. So the ask right now is to call and email our elected leadership and also our appointed leadership and our city manager and tell them that we do not agree with how the Measure U money has been allocated, and we have some other ways that money could be spent. And to make sure you share that with your unions and with your faith organizations and with your community organizations and with your friends. And don't forget grandma, who is not on social media and does not have maybe an email address, and take your laptop over to her house and show her, or pull it up on her phone and talk her through it. Have her talk her bridge club through it. Really make sure that you're talking to all the people in your life about this, because this is something that our community should be able to come together around. It's not something where we have to invent where the money should go. There were campaign promises, And the thing we know is that in the midst of a pandemic, when so many of our Sacramentans are taking pay cuts and experiencing furloughs and have had their businesses shuttered and are unemployed, that the last thing that we need is to be paying for bad behavior from our police department in the way of these settlements and to pay for them to have raises. And so for those of you who are interested in supporting MH First, please, by all means, follow and learn about that. But there's also an immediate ask for how we can make sure that we're starting to extract funding from this system that is not working for us, and we can invest it in our communities. And now more than ever, that is a need. So tinyurl.com/giveitbacksac.
Flo, I gotta stop you. It's a //
Oh, / Is it forward, back? I never know which one. /
It's one of those slashes.
tinyurl.com/giveitbacksac. And you'll have all the information there, what the ask is, and please share it wide and far.
Flo, for Wednesday's meeting on the cops, is that like, obviously they're not gonna, like, you can't go to City Hall and see that in person, right? So
it will not be in person, but we do need to push really hard for them to process their phone calls through Zoom, because their phone system does not work. And so there are some additional asks that we need to do to make sure that public comment can be heard. But you can also send public comment in advance. And we strongly urge people to email and call the offices. Those also count as public comments if you're talking about something that's going to be on an upcoming agenda.
Where can people do that? Where can people make those public comments?
You can make the public comments on the city's website. You can also email any of the elected officials and share your thoughts and on any of the items with them.
And if you follow the URL that Flo gave, it has every city official on the second to last slide.
Yep.
I mean, so
all the info.
All of this sounds like incredible content, which is something that I have more than a passing interest in. I've actually had a fair amount of free time lately, and I've been spending that time, I've been filling it up, processing a lot of really, really great, I would say premium content from Voices River City, but it's been months now and I'm starting to run low. And so I guess the question is for you guys, is there...
I have no idea what's happening right now.
Is there
this is so funny because I'm watching Asantewa's face right now.
Is the
glancing
eyebrows
over at Flo like, what the fuck is happening?
There's a lot of emoting happening considering she's wearing a mask.
Yeah,
too.
you can read it
all
just
I
in
can
her
see
eyes.
is her eyes.
How it is this at the end of every episode.
Oh, this lets us know we're dead? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Not
I have to
quite,
pee.
not
It
quite.
allows me to do all the pitches. Yeah.
Right. So this is the part where I plead with Dave to please tell me where I can get more of this great Voices content that I crave so much and have come to rely on in these troubling times.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a website. It's called voicesrivercity.com. We've been around for 3 years. We have some really weird stuff over the last 3 years too. Obviously, the current iteration is the podcast, but I'd recommend doing a deep dive. Our Follows the Money project is really interesting. Flo mentioned that earlier, and that showed how much money Darryl takes in from cops. We've got more of that coming on the District 3 Board of Soups race. But there's been all sorts of news and arts coverage over the years. We've done some really weird kind of interviews. So just go check that out. We are on Twitter at Voices River City, Facebook, Voices River City, Instagram. Skylar always hits a home run on that at Voices River City. We are on YouTube if you want to look at our pretty little faces. And
if you want to see Asantewaa emoting behind a mask,
just like with her eyes, yeah,
Worth it.
very effectively. I might
Super
add.
worth it.
that's a sultry emote right there.
It's a different kind of emote. That's sending a different message than the last emote.
And then finally, if you want to help us keep doing what we're doing, pitch in a little bit. Come to patreon.com/voicesrivercity. You can go as low as $5 a month, which is as cheap as a beer that you're not getting at the bar right now anyway, if you're doing what you should be doing. Or you could do $25 a month up to that, and you'll get a t-shirt and a coffee mug in the mail. And we've had a few people signing up for that the last few days, which is really fun and exciting. So
welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited. We're really happy to send you this merch. And yeah, I guess that's about it.
I would say, like, if you have the means to help us out financially, that's amazing, and we love you. If you don't, another way that you can help the show, if you have 10 seconds, is to cruise onto Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review and say nice things about us. That kind of helps us.
Smash that subscribe button.
And smash that like and subscribe button. But yeah, that really does help us out in terms of getting us in front of as big of an audience as we can get.
Yeah, and just let your friends know about us. I think word of mouth has been really successful with like people who like us telling their friends, and it turns out we're kind of fun, hopefully. So
yeah, and if you hate us, that's cool too. Tell people that you hate that you know this great podcast, and trick them into listening to our lame show.
And also the FBI is listening now, so shout out to our FBI intern.
We should come up with a name for him.
We do.
Agent Squillion.
Agent Squillion. All right.
I love it.
Hi, Agent Squillion. You be safe too.
Yes, take care.
I'm on Twitter at @YunoKempa.
I'm there as Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4 YOU.
I am Shan ND Stevens.
And I am at Flojaune. That's FLOJAUNE.
Now, Asantewaa, are you findable on the internet, or do you prefer not to be?
Oh, Asantewaa RN on all the platforms.
Great.
Hell yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Sick.
Well, I guess that's it.
I think that does it. Asantewaa, thank you so much again for coming on and doing the show with us.
You are phenomenal.
She's trying to go to the bathroom, folks.
I know she is.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll just cut straight to the end. Everybody, thank you for listening. We love you. Everybody stay safe.
Stay healthy.
No! No! You're stay sane.
Stay
sane. Okay, let's
stay healthy.
I love it. And stay the hell away from me.
To be fair, it's like the middle of the night for Shannon.
I know.
Okay, Shannon, go to bed. Just upload your recording and go to bed.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Oh, that was a fun episode.
Stay safe.